Let's now finally write some code to use the concept that we talked about in the last lecture. And I will start by opening up the starter project that you can download for this section. And once again, it's on our desktop already. So I just need to open it. And here we have the HTML file, which connects with our script. And here's just the empty file. All right, so this lecture will be about creating objects using the function constructor. So I'm just writing it here to structure our code better. So I'm going to start by writing our well-known John object, right? So John with the name of John, of course, and the year of birth. And then our job. So this is the way that we have been writing objects using the object literal, right? And now imagine that we wanted to create a lot of objects with different names and ages and jobs. So as we learned in the last lecture, we can use some kind of blueprint for this, right? So in JavaScript, there are a couple of different ways to create objects. But probably the most popular way is using something called a function constructor. And this is a very common JavaScript pattern. And the pattern is something like a standard way that we have to solve a problem always in the same way. So the function constructor is a pattern for like writing a blueprint, such as we have been talking before. So the name function constructor implies that we're going to use a function here, right? And we want this constructor to be called person. So we create a function called person, and the usual convention in JavaScript is that we always write function constructors with a capital letter here, right? So person is with a capital P, okay? And we always do this for function constructors. All right, so function and the parameters for this function constructors will be the variables that we want to set in our object. So in this case, it's going to be name, year of birth, and the job. And now I'm just going to show you how this is done, and I will explain to you why this works just in a second, okay? So what we do is to attach these variables, so these arguments, to the this variable of this function's execution context. So just like this. So this.name, and remember that the this variable is simply an object as well, so we can do it like this. So this name will be name, which means the one that we get here as an input for the function. So this dot name will be equal to name, which is the parameter of the function, and then the same thing for the other two. So this dot year of birth will be equal to year of birth. And then this dot job will be the job that we pass into the function. And that's it. This is the function constructor. And again, I will explain to you why this works in a second. All right, and now that we have this function constructor in place, we can then use it to create a John object. So let's create some space here and then var John. We call new, and this is the new operator, new person, and then we pass our arguments into the function. So we already know our arguments, so 1990, and then the job teacher. So this is how we create new objects using the constructor function. And this is called instantiation, because these objects here are instances of the person object, as we learned in the last lecture. Alright, and as promised, I'm now going to explain you how all of this works. So first, in order to understand how this works, we need to first understand what the new operator does. So when we use the new operator, first a brand new empty object is created. Alright, so an empty object, this is important. Then after that, the constructor function, which in this case is person, right, is called with the arguments that we specified. Okay, so first an empty object is created and then the function is called. So, and as we already know, calling a function creates a new execution context that also has a this variable, right? Now, we know that in a regular function call, the this variable points to the global object, right? But if we now look at our function constructor here, then having the this variable pointing at the global object wouldn't be so useful, right? Because like this, we would simply set all these properties on the global object. And that's of course not what we want. And that's why the new operator takes care of this. And it makes it so that the this variable of the function points to the empty object that was created in the beginning by the new operator. Remember that? So again, what the new operator does is to point to this variable not to the global object, but to this new empty object that was created in the beginning when we used this operator. So then after that, when we set the name, year and job properties to this, then that's the same as setting them right on our new empty object. Okay, and finally, if the constructor function does not return anything, and as you can see here that is clearly the case, then the result is simply the object that was created in the first step. So this new empty object here. And this empty object, which was created here, now has the properties that we defined. So the name, year of birth, and job in this case. Okay? And then finally all of this is simply assigned to the John variable. And just like this, we created an object called John simply by calling a function constructor. So again, our new operator here first creates an empty object, then it calls our function with the this variable not pointing to the global object, but to the new object that was created here. And then when this code here runs, the this variable is no longer the global variable. And so these are all set on the new object, which is then in the end assigned to this variable. So I hope that makes sense. So let's now add inheritance to the game. And for that, we are going to bring back our calculate age function. So let's now suppose that we wanted to add a method to our objects. And that sounds easy, right? We could just add it to our function constructor like we would do with a normal object. So just like this. So this dot calculate age, it's simply a function which logs to the console the age. So 2016, we already know this by now, minus this dot year of birth, right? And now we can actually use this and it should of course work. So John.calculate age, and let's now open this. And that's not what I wanted, so here we are. And in a console, and what's this here? Oh, it's nothing special. So now it's alright. So 26 is our expected outcome here. So everything works just fine. So let's now create a couple of more objects here for more people. So var Jane is also a new person. And this is going to work the exact same way, right? So now I say Jane was born in 1969, let's say, and she's a designer. And it will also create Mark, so a new person called Mark, obviously. He was born in 1948 and he is retired. So if I now run this, then each of the object that is now created has the calculate age method attached to them, right? Because it's right here in the constructor function or the function constructor of all of these three objects, right? So again, each of these objects now has the method. Now in this case, it's just one function with one line of code. So this is no big deal. But now imagine that we had 20 functions in each object and that each of them would have 100 lines of code. Now that would not be very efficient because then we would have 3 copies of the exact same thing, right? And that is exactly why we use inheritance in the exact same way that we have learned in the last lecture. So what exactly did we learn in the last lecture? So we've learned that we have to add all the methods and properties that we want to be inherited into the constructor's prototype property. And it sounds difficult, but it's really not. So let's just do this. Just creating some space here, and I will actually do it here. So all we have to do is to say person.prototype, because as I was saying, it's simply a property. So all we have to do is to use the dot and then prototype, and then we can add our function there. So calculate age and then our function. And I can actually copy it from here because it's the exact same code. Okay, and now I'm going to remove it from here. So right now, if I reload this, effectively none of the objects have the calculate age method really attached to them, but still they are going to be able to use it. They will have access to it because it's in their prototype, right? So let's prove that. So I'm going to put all of these together and then call these methods on all of them. So calculate age for Jane and also for Mark. Calculate age. And if I now reload this, here is the result. So all the 3 ages for all the 3 people. So again, the method is not anymore in the constructor, right? But we can still use it. And that's because it's in the prototype property of our function constructor. So inheritance actually works, and this is inheritance in practice. So this is really great, right? This is so powerful. You just really understood how this works and how it works behind the scenes. So you can not just use it, you can also understand why this works. And this is really extremely powerful, and it's really great for you. So attaching methods to the constructor function's prototype property is something that is really common to use. We can of course also add properties instead of methods, but that's not really common, but I still want to show it to you, okay? So such as we did with the method here, we can do the same with properties. So once again, person.prototype, and now we can say, for example, a last name property. And we can say that they should all be called Smith, right? Because as we know, this will be inherited for all of them. And once again, I want to prove that to you. So let's console log this property. So first for John dot last name, and then for the other 2. So console.log Jane.lastname and then Mark.lastname. So let's see what happens. Okay, so all of them are called Smith. So once again, this property is not directly in the object, right? But we have access to it because it's in the prototype property of the function constructor. So all John, Jane, and Mark inherit this property. So once more, we proved that inheritance really works. And this is a really big deal. So if you understood this lecture and the last one, then you are well on your way to become a really great JavaScript developer. What I want you to do now is to create your own type of objects to play around with constructors and prototypes a bit. And this way you can consolidate what you just learned here. So I hope that sounds like a great idea for you. And then after that, let's go straight to the next lecture.